Welcome to part 6, stage 6 of my God Hand hard mode tutorial. At the beginning of this stage you get La Bamba 2, I believe, and that's might be your best roulette for crowd control as far as dealing with multiple enemies at once if you want to damage them all at once. It may be one of the better ones at this point. So yeah, I will be probably skipping, certain areas where I don't have to fight enemies, so I'll try to show the areas where that can be done. I believe this is one of the areas where you can do that. Of course, I always recommend running around and grabbing all the boxes and shit and just getting all the items that you can. But yeah, better not to fight enemies unless you have to. Now, I believe this is the checkpoint when you drop down here. I believe you activate a checkpoint, so you've just effectively skipped all those enemies in the first area and made a checkpoint here. But it is worth grabbing the items, like I said, because you may want to use them. There's a lot of hard fights on this level, so it's good to be prepared for next. Always try to think ahead for the next area. Now, you'll notice I started experimenting with a lot of new moves and combos here. And a lot of this was more for, just trying out different things and having a little fun with it. Some of these moves were not necessarily that much more effective than just having a basic combo of like just regular jabs in your square combo. Because as you know, in this game, you make your own combos. You can configure all that and pick what moves you want to come out in what order. But I do experiment with a lot of new moves. There is a move that I like. I like that move where you fall back and launch the guy. I was finding that to be a pretty useful move, but at the time I didn't know about the hand plant kick, how you could use that to set up a launch. So once I figured that out, I don't really even need that move where you fall back anymore to launch guys like that. But it is effective because when you fall back and launch an enemy with that move, you don't take any damage from upper hits, so you're dodging and launching the enemy at the same time. See, like that? It's a very useful move before you know how to do that hand plant kick launch combo. But like I said, you're able to do that hand plant kick launch combo from stage 4 on when the move becomes available. So had I known that, I would have been using it much earlier. But you will see me use it when I finally figure it out later. And as I've been explaining in the last few videos, you do the hand plant kick launch combo by doing the hand plant kick, which is a move you purchase in the store after stage 4. It's about 110,000, I think, to buy it. You do the move, and then when the enemy is juggled in the air, you hit triangle immediately, and you'll launch the enemy into the distance. It has a lot of invincibility frames, so you can do this in crowds without much risk of even getting hit, and you can also launch the enemies into each other. So that means you can launch enemies off cliffs very easily. And, you can launch them off cliffs very easily, and you can also just manage tons of enemies when you have a lot of smaller enemies around. You can also launch smaller enemies into the larger enemies. Larger and taller enemies can't be launched with the hand plant kick. They can be juggled, but they can't be launched with the follow-up triangle move. So that is something to consider. But you'll see me using it a little bit later. This is one of the harder parts of the stage, this little bridge. So I utilize some of the throwing items, the barrels and the pole. And then I start doing some cheap shit by using the ladder animations to make the enemies stumble, which I'll show. But like I said, had I known about the hand plant kick, I wouldn't have needed to be using these roulette orbs and all this shit. I could have just used the hand plant kick comboed with the triangle to launch the enemies all into the pits. It would have been much, much easier to do it that way. The only enemy that I wouldn't be able to launch into the pit using the hand plant kick trick with that launcher is the taller guy, but it would have been very easy had I known about that. So instead of following what I did, I recommend just doing that. Just use it on the crowds. Try to line it up so that you can launch them all into the hole. But yeah, if you don't do it that way, then you may want to do it this way. But there's really no reason to do this. But I would use the ladders to exploit these guys. I fight them a little bit here, but then I start climbing up and down the ladder. And, every time you do that, the enemies have to climb back up the ladder to get to you. So, of course, that puts them at a huge disadvantage. So while they're climbing up the ladder, you can pretty much just beat the shit out of them and you can knock them off of the edge. So I think they take fall damage from that too. So eventually they will all just be dead. It's a very easy way to deal with these enemies. So really no reason for this part to give you any real trouble. it can be hard if you try fighting all these enemies normal without trying to manipulate them in any way. And, of course, not using the launcher I mentioned. But, yeah, very easy. All these guys are now dead. I think they all fell off and took massive damage. So, this is a fast way to deal with this part. You shouldn't even really die too much on this. I think I died a lot on this part. But, of course, part of that was just trying to figure out what strategies I was going to use to get through each section. So sometimes it took, you can save so much time by watching a video and seeing some better techniques. A lot of the techniques I use, like I said, I think my tutorial is probably more useful to more players because a lot of the techniques I use involve using simple techniques in AI manipulation, things that I would normally do when I play a game. Because I'm used to playing through a lot of these extreme modes, and a lot of times I find ways to exploit enemies without, I don't get complicated with movesets unless I have to beat the game. And, I really didn't have to do that in this game. I mean, I learned more and more techniques as I got farther that were useful, but I could narrow it down really to a handful of useful techniques for the entire game. Stage 1 is the hardest, like I said, because you have very little techniques at your disposal and very little health and roulette orbs and all that shit. So it's I found the first stage to be the hardest. And then, like I said, once you beat the first stage of the game, you have the skill to beat the rest of the game, especially if you watch my tutorial, because I'll show how to exploit shit and break down everything. There's still going to be some very hard parts, obviously. There's going to be a lot of very hard parts, but it is going to be a lot easier with understanding how encounters work and understanding which you can skip. Now, I don't remember where all the checkpoints are in the levels. I kind of base it on if I see an editing stutter, because I edited out the deaths, so that would show some of the checkpoints. But aside from that, I really don't remember where all the checkpoints were in each level, so I won't always be able to accurately speak on that. But, if I remember, or if I think that I suspect it, I'll bring it up. But yeah, you may have to beat this demon. I don't remember if this is a required fight. And also remember that some of the demons are random and some of them are scripted and always come out of the same enemy. So I do not remember which one this is. It has been 2 years, so there's a lot of shit I don't remember. Even watching the videos over, it's difficult to tell certain things. Sometimes rescuing these civilians can be useful. You may get a decent pickup, but a lot of times at this point in the game, you really don't need to do it. You can just run and grab boxes and areas. But you may get a healing item. The strawberry is very good. Obviously, gives you back all your health. So, it could be useful. I'm not sure if you actually need to kill this guy, like I said. I think the rest of these fights in this area may be optional. I think I can even leave now if I wanted to. I think I was just exploring. I probably could have exited through that exit door. If I remember right. Actually, no, there may be a key. I think one of these has a key. I think you only have to defeat one of these women. If you defeat the right one, I believe you get a key. So yeah, once you get that, you can just leave if you want. You may want to try grabbing shit out of the boxes or whatever for the next area. These enemies can be aggressive. There's actually a trick to make these enemies super easy and not even get hit. And that trick is using the hand plant kick once again, but not using the launch. Just use the hand plant kick again and again, over and over again, and eventually you'll get them into a stun state. And then you, of course, mash circle to utilize the stun state. But you can just keep doing that again and again, and you can extract God Hand from them by stunning them so much. So each time you get them stunned, you can extract 2 God Hands with Yes Ma'am Kablam, two extractions. So you can make them extremely easy that way and get a full God Hand meter. I didn't know about that, though. See, there's things that I learned much later in the game, so at this point I wasn't doing that. I believe I just ended up leaving this area because I had the key and I didn't need anything else. So I don't even think I fight this person. More enemies appear as well, I believe, but I think I just skipped them all. I usually only fight shit when I actually have to kill shit to progress. Of course, sometimes I don't realize that, how this area works, but other times I would look up in video to see, exactly what I need to do. So now you have an easy fight against a single enemy. You can, of course, defeat him and get the club. You may not even need to fight this guy. I think this may be another skippable enemy, where you can just run up the ladder and skip ahead. It looks like here I may have switched my combos back to just some standard jabs, which most of the time I found, worked the best. But yeah, whenever you have a single enemy, most of the time you can pretty much just spam hand plant kicks again and again on most enemies, and it takes a while, but eventually they go into a stun state. By doing that rapidly, you just keep doing it every time they get up. I do end up showing that technique, later in the tutorial and another, later videos. Maybe in stage 7 or 8, but, like I said, a lot of things I didn't know at this point. You don't have to fight that enemy at all. You can just skip that. You can skip both of those enemies, in that whole area if you want. So let me see. For this part, all you have to do is light 3. You have to just use a torch to light up 3 of the mouths of the horned statue guys on the wall. So for this, you can skip every enemy in this whole area if you want, and just light the torches. Though it can be a pain in the ass to try to light the torches when enemies are trying to hit you. So keep that in mind when trying to skip them. So it's up to you what enemies you want to fight. You can, like I said, try to just run through and just light all the torches. Once you light 3 torches, you light 3 different mouths, you'll open the gate and you'll be able to go into the next area, regardless of how many enemies are running around. So you light 1, and once you light all 3, that gate on the top floor will open up. So yeah, so you can decide if you want to try to grab items out of the barrels or from enemy drops or whatever. But yeah, you really don't have to engage too much with this area. It's just a matter of lighting those things up. And, of course, watching this combat again, I'm thinking about how I could have just been spamming the hand plant kick with the launcher again and again and really wiped these guys out. But there'll be plenty of that later on once I figure it out. I actually figured out pretty shortly. I think maybe in the next encounter or 2 I'll figure it out. And then you'll see me using it a lot. So you got this guy blocking the mouth that you want to light. So sometimes they do get in the way. And sometimes it's easier just to kill them so you can, you have the room to light it up. Because you do have to line up with the mouth kind of in the center to be able to light it. So it's a little bit finicky with that. So sometimes it's just easier to kill all the enemies. So yeah, I had to go get another torch. I think there's always a torch on the bottom floor. Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to beat the area. So yeah, if you jump down off the ladder and then back up, sometimes the enemies will still be on the bottom floor trying to get to you. And then you can go back up and light the mouth real fast. You can try to lure them off to the bottom floor. If I remember right, I think that does work sometimes. So you can experiment with that if you don't want to fight the enemies. Here I was just like, fuck it, I used my God Hand and got rid of these guys. I'd recommend using your God Hand over using the roulettes because God Hand is easier to refill by fighting. So yeah, once you light this last mouth over here, you can now exit. There's going to be a bunch of enemies that come out, but you know, you can completely skip them. I think there's even a trial, a ferry trial through the door, meaning you can make a checkpoint if you want, if I remember right. Yeah, I think it's down here. So if you go down here, you can activate this arena fight and then just commit suicide in it, lose the fight, and you'll get a checkpoint. So now you won't have to... I believe the checkpoint starts with all these enemies grouping up on you trying to fucking destroy you, but it's very easy. All you got to do is jump up off the ledge and escape. But you can make a checkpoint if you want to be extra safe. You really don't have to because you can just, you know, go in there, get the boxes and exit, but it's just safer to make a little checkpoint. As I've explained, anytime you activate an arena fight and exit, you create a checkpoint. So any enemies that you killed are going to be permanently dead from the checkpoint. And as long as you didn't beat the arena fight, you can do this again and again and make as many checkpoints as you want. And I'm going to be showing that way later. So yeah, here's how you can get full God Hand off of a door. I showed it already in another video, but if you have a door with no enemies around, it's very easy to just extract God Hand. You know, just keep doing your extractions and dodges needed. And, you know, keep doing it until you have a full bar. So, you know, using my God Hand wasn't even really that big of a deal because I was able to refill it immediately after on this door. Since the door does count as fighting an enemy, you know, you are able to extract God Hand off of it, and it really doesn't do anything except, you know, slam together occasionally. But it's a very easy way to get a full God Hand bar. This part's a little finicky, but it's the same platforming you did on normal. But it's, you know, it can be a little anal with the way you line it up. You do have to take into account your slow movement from platform to platform. It's easy to miss. But you get a checkpoint right here anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm not sure if it's a death if you fall in the pit. It probably is, but I don't remember. But you have a checkpoint right there. Now all you got to do is throw these little bones to lure the dog to the fat man. No challenge in that. And then, you know, I don't think you have to fight any of the enemies afterward. You can just run past. Of course, it's always up to you if you want to try to break boxes and grab some supplies like God Hand and roulettes. But as you can see here, I have everything full, so I didn't need any of that shit. And you could, like I said, you can easily fill your God Hand meter on that door, so you shouldn't need that. So yeah, once the dog gets to the bone by the fat man, you'll get a cutscene, and the bridge will fall, and you can now just run out of here. I think there's some boxes in that cave with all the enemies, so if you really need shit, you can just run around in there and try to grab shit. But yeah, it's you know, not really, you know, needed if you have shit your shit full. So yeah, skip all these enemies if you want, and now we fight these 5 midgets again. Now, they seem a lot faster and more aggressive in this second fight than they did in the first. But the strategy is going to be very similar, and we have even more moves and health and stuff, you know, to deal with them, even though they're more aggressive. But they can be a little challenging here, but eventually you're going to get good pickups, and you're going to group them together well enough to where you'll take them all out. Remember, when using the God Hand and fighting one, try to turn your camera a little bit so you can hit multiple of them at once. Because the more that you damage at once, obviously, the more overall damage you're doing to the boss. If you think of it as a single boss, you know, you get more damage when you hit multiple of them at the same time. Throw all the boxes at him, obviously, so you can see all the shit you have to work with and, you know, do a little extra damage. Area of effect attacks like La Bamba 2 would probably be a really good choice, or the Typhoon Kick I think might still be pretty decent. La Bamba 2 might be a little bit wasteful. I think that uses 2 roulette orbs, but that's probably why I was using Typhoon Kicks, because they're a little bit less wasteful, I guess. But either way, eventually you'll have your God Hand full again. You can use that again. Finish off any scragglers. Even though they're aggressive and fast here, it's more of a fun fight with all the resources you have at this point. This is one of the more challenging stages. But as I said, and I'll keep saying, the first stage is still by far the hardest stage because you have such little to work with. So, once you beat that, you can beat the rest of the game with enough persistence. So now just grab whatever is left over that you think you're going to need and just leave. We're a little bit more than halfway through the stage at this point. And there are some harder parts, for sure. This part coming up can be very difficult, but I'm going to now demonstrate the move that I learned. This is where I first figured out that I could launch out of the hand plant kick. You can do it with a kick too, but the best way to do it is like that. You do the hand plant kick and then you go into a jump kick and launch them, and it launches enemies that get in the way too, so as long as they're smaller enemies. It may launch the larger enemies if they get in the way of the launching spin kick part. But on larger enemies, you can't do the jump kick follow-up, by hitting triangle. But yeah, all you do, like I said, you use the hand plant kick move, and then you just hit triangle when the enemy is juggled in the air. The timing is super, super forgiving. It pretty much works every time. As long as the enemy's not on the ground, just do it when the enemy's in the air. Just do it immediately, basically. For these demons, I usually end up using some shit because they're always very irritating to deal with. But hand plant kicks and juggles is a reliable way to deal with them. The hand plant kick is so effective on most enemies. It's even very effective on one of the later bosses. So yeah, you have a few more enemies here, but you see this just wrecks these enemies. You can just spam the shit out of this. So I'm going to recommend spamming this shit as heavily as possible. It starts making a lot of the fights a joke later on because of, all the bullshit you can pull. But it still has some very hard parts later on, even with, with this. There's some very long endurance encounters and some very, very hard fights. But you will definitely make a lot of these, enemies with smaller enemies so much easier. Now, you may get a checkpoint for this next part, but I don't remember if you do. I think you might because there's a little cutscene, but see the little cutscene. Usually that's a checkpoint, but this is actually quite a hard part. But it's not going to be that hard because, I think when I first did this part, I didn't know about that juggle trick with the hand plant kick and the launcher. But see, once I figured this out, I think it made the part quite easy. So after watching my video, you may have a very easy time with this, because just knowing this move here just changes the entire game. And like I said, I could have been doing this shit since stage 4, but I didn't know I didn't know I could do a launcher after the hand plant kick. So, just by knowing that, it opened up the combat so much. But of course, this tall guy's fast and still needs to be dealt with, and you can't use the launcher on him, but you can launch other enemies at him. So, the bigger enemies can't be launched though. So you may want to get rid of them with God Hand. It's honestly not a big deal if you use some roulettes and shit on this encounter because this is it's a very tough fight. Even with the launcher, it can be tricky because you have some harder enemies here. I can pull some bullshit. Now, I don't know if I really intended to do the chain yanker, but I was cornered, so I had to do something. I didn't have a lot of time to pick what I wanted to use. The enemies are very aggressive. Especially if you get cornered, use that hand plant kick because you can stun the enemies and hit them and get you out of a bad situation. So you see, I'm not afraid to use God Hands in this situation. And you see, spamming that move, that two-hit combo with the hand plant kick and launcher really made that fight a lot easier. At first, I think I was doing that without knowing about that at all, so it was a very, very hard encounter. I think I died a lot on it. Of course, you're seeing the results of my successful attempts and not all the failures, so you can use that knowledge to save you a lot of trouble in dying, many, many times. Now, for this part, you don't have to fight anyone. You can just run past all the rocks. Use the little side cavities to run in briefly, and then just run out. Don't spend any time in there or you'll get hit by the enemies, but very easy to avoid everything. There is quite a difficult boss coming up that was troublesome for a while, but I ended up getting some good hits on him. And you may want to use some of the moves that I used. I actually did massive damage on him with, I think it was the home run roulette. So that may work very well on him. And you may want to use it in the way I used it to do huge damage if you have enough roulettes available. So here I just throw the bricks at him or whatever to the 2x4 to kind of stun him. And once I have him in place, I use the home run god, and I think I got a direct hit on him. And it did huge damage. And it also damaged his minions too, so it was kind of useful place to use it. I don't know if Discombobulator was the best single roulette to use on him for maximum damage, but you see I had most of his health done by this point. He actually lives for a while because the hard thing about this fight is he's very hard to hit because you can only hit him at specific times when he comes down and he runs like crazy. So whenever you hit him with a jump kick, you do very, very little damage. So it does take a while. By running around in circles away from where he is, sometimes I even run directly around him. But by keep running in circles, I found you can dodge pretty much all of his attacks. And I don't think I got hit by any of his attacks while he's floating. And all I did was basically run in circles. So that's all you really need to do while he's floating. And you're just waiting for him to come back down. And, you can ignore the minions as well. And just wait for him to come back down. You're just going to wait for him, and then when he comes back down, you're going to be targeting him. So as he's floating down, do a little juggle if you can. Try to catch him with jump kicks and just hit him when you can. It's a bit tedious, but if you got some good hits in early on with those roulettes, you'll have most of his health gone. If you had 4 roulettes, you can probably kill him with maybe 2 home run gods or whatever it's called. I mean, you can take him out. You probably have more than enough moves to kill him with 4 roulettes. So that is an option. If you got here with no roulettes, then you'll have the default 1 roulette that they start you with and whatever drops you get. I don't know if you can get drops in this area, but if not, you're going to be in for a long fight, most likely. It's good to make multiple save slots because, you can go back a few encounters if you have to and try to save more roulettes and shit for the fight if you think that'll help. That's why I always recommend, saving on a different slot each time you make a new save between the areas. On hard, it's especially useful to do it that way. Because I think there was a few times when I went back to get more resources and, do an encounter without wasting as much shit. Or, try to get better pickups in an encounter. But yeah, once you finally do take him down, you can finish off these minions. Now, I don't know if you have to kill these minions to exit the area. But that's what I ended up doing. You may not have to. You may be able to just run out the door once the boss is dead, but I didn't test that. Now, these are taller enemies, so you can't spam the hand plant kick launch combo. You can still spam hand plant kick on them, though, and if you do it enough times, you'll stun them. But when there's 2 of them, it's a little bit harder to keep doing it to them every time they get up. These guys also seem to dodge the hand plant kick a little bit more often, so it may be harder to spam it on them. But, I mean, it's useful to do often because there's very low risk to you because you can just backflip out of it and take no damage. Hand plant kick makes you pretty much invincible to upper attacks, so it's a very safe move. You make it safer by rolling back immediately after finishing it to, make sure you don't get hit. So yeah, just finish these guys off, or just try the door and see if it lets you exit. You can try it. There's not too much more left to this level. So yeah, this part, I'm not sure if you can skip the enemies in this part. I don't remember exactly which part this is, but oh yeah, I think you can skip a number of these enemies or knock them into pits, if I remember right. Yeah, I knocked this guy into a pit. This is usually a harder enemy, so if you get on this ledge here, you can maybe use a typhoon kick and try to knock him into the pit. It'll also hit these other enemies, which I don't know if you need to even kill the women, but you want to at least knock that guy into the pit. I think it's useful to kill him. I don't even know if he's a required enemy. You may be able to skip all these enemies and go to the next area. That's why I do recommend, if you want to make sure what parts you can skip, check a speedrun video and check this segment. Because, the speedrunner will probably beat this level in about 10 minutes or something, because it's a longer level, but you'll probably be able to see what parts can be skipped. You can also kind of knock them off the ledge and nudge them off. You unfortunately can't launch them off the ledge using the hand plant launcher combo because they're too big. So yeah, over here there's going to be another door type of thing, except this time it's a switch and not a door, but you have to fight it. I don't even think that one fights back at all, though. You can extract God Hand off of it, though, I think, probably because it doesn't attack you, it's not considered an enemy. So I guess the developers thought about that. See, I try extracting God Hand, but it doesn't work. So yeah, this part's very easy. You just run up and down the ladders and activate switches pretty much. I'm pretty sure you can skip pretty much all the enemies in here if you want. But now you can use the launcher combo and launch these guys off the ledge, so it makes it very quick if you want to deal with them, get rid of them fast. There's only one tall enemy that can't be launched directly, but you can launch enemies into him, obviously. Now, there's an invisible wall here with this whip bitch. So, when you launch her, she doesn't go off the ledge, but you can just do this a few times for an easy kill. Or you can reposition yourself, to launch her over the other edge. I don't think there's an invisible wall on the other side. See, this side is open, so it allows you to launch him. But this guy's too tall, obviously, to launch. So yeah, just hit these switches. It definitely makes things easier when you realize how many of the encounters in the game you can actually run past and skip. And, you just focus on grabbing the resources you need out of the boxes. It definitely, you can make levels a lot easier that way. But the real trick that makes some of the areas a lot easier is later on with the creating your own checkpoints with the arenas that I explained. You're going to see me exploit that on either the next stage or the final stage. So after this is all done, I think there's just one more boss to finish off the stage. And it's going to be the same strategy pretty much of, spamming the chain yanker with the yes ma'am kablam. I believe this next area, there's some, fairly difficult enemies that you can just completely skip. So yeah, just grab the boxes here, break the boxes, and get the resources out of the box, but don't worry about the enemies. Sliding is a fast way when you're running to not, to take out multiple boxes. You can slide in and take out a few boxes. rather than, stopping and hitting each one individually. Yeah, so now I believe you can just leave this whole area. I think I still wanted to get the last box, so I ran around in a circle here. So yeah, once you've gotten all the boxes, just leave. And now we have the boss for the area. Shannon, it's Shannon's final form. She's really not that much harder than most of the other bosses have been with the Chain Yanker and Yes Ma'am Kablam combo, so we'll be using that heavily again. That's why I say it's an essential move, because you're able to use that on so many bosses once you get it. So yeah, initially I like to run around and throw all the pots at the boss, because I like to see everything, like I said, that I have to work with. You get different item drops each time you die, so it's kind of worth seeing like what shit you have to use. I try to do most of the boss fights strictly on pretty much Chain Yanker and Yes Ma'am Kablam and God Hand stun animations, without any direct combat. I try to do that whenever I can. I mean, there's usually maybe a little bit of direct combat where I have to fuck with, punch the enemy and dodge it a little bit, but I minimized a lot of that shit by budgeting the Chain Yankers and the roulettes. It's pretty much an endless cycle, of stuns and God Hand. Now, of course, sometimes you will run out of drops before you can get all her health down, and you may have to improvise a little bit and fight her normally. It does depend on what kind of item drops you get and how many roulette orbs and God Hand you have when you come into the fight initially. She can be a little tricky when you're fighting her normally. She has some fast attacks. But I was kind of just barreling through that, just using these, exploiting these moves. But yeah, now she's almost dead, and you see I still have resources left that I probably won't even have to use. I believe this pummel finishes her off. Well, almost, yeah, I finish her off with a few regular hits. But yeah, that's about it for this level. If you have any questions, let me know, and stay tuned for the next 2 parts.